So if you have suggestions for the seating, for the meeting, for the temperature, for snacks, for how we interact with you all, for how we're sharing information, do tell us. And I look forward also to working with your officers to dig into some of those things. I also want to share with you that we have a brand new AV system, and you are our first meeting using it. We've switched from Zoom to Teams, which is also new for us doing these meetings. So I beg your forgiveness in advance for any technical issues that emerge. We have invited a few staff to join us in the room. You may also see some staff watching from online. We have asked that people get some work done during the meeting if they're watching, but people are excited to meet you and see you in action. So I only have one more minute before we move on. Thanks again. And we have 3 speakers here today to reflect and honor the fact that we have advanced this organization to a whole new and more sustainable, more representative, more equitable governance structure with sustainable funding. So with us today, we have Ed Washington, who was on our interim board, also served as a civic and community leader for decades here in the Greater Portland region, and happens to be quite familiar with the Vanport flood. But he's going to make a few remarks, and then we have a couple of other people who I will introduce at that time. Once we're done, there'll be very brief remarks, again, to celebrate and honor you all for your service. And then we'll go into the oath of office, and then each of you will have an opportunity, no obligation, to make a few remarks, hopefully about a minute, minute and a half, something like that. Again, we felt like it was important. We're on the record. You guys are all here for a reason. We want to give you a chance to articulate that reason for the record. So thank you so much. Ed, if you're prepared, could you please offer your remarks? If you could stand up, perhaps at the end of the table, that would be terrific. And if you'd like a chair, I'm happy to get you one.
I was going there. I was going to sit and relax. All of a sudden, the chair disappeared. Pull it out the bucket. You know how we used to do when we were kids. And we would always get scolded by the teacher, saying somebody could break their back. You know, I just have a few short comments to make, but I'm going to ask for us just to take a moment and silence for Bob Salinger, who passed away. And I had known Bob, but I worked with him from time to time, but just a moment to think about Bob. Thank you. This morning, this is one of these kind of crazy days for me. I woke up quite early and I usually will turn the news on, and I was greeted with all the stuff that's going on in the Middle East. And it's sad. It's really sad. It's just too much. And so I was looking forward to coming and spend a few minutes with you all, particularly based on kinds of things you're going to be doing and will do. You know, this is such an important job that you all have. I think two of the worst things that you can deal with in your life is fires and floods. And I was reflecting this morning on living in Vanport. My family moved to Vanport in 1944, and we were there up through the flood. But in 1947, I remember our unit caught on fire early in the morning. My mother ushering all of us kids downstairs because we were up on the second floor. I remember the stairs being warm, but we got out safe. We lost a few things, but we didn't lose our lives. Nobody was hurt. And then, you know, the very next year, we had to deal with the flood. And we lost everything. Everything that we had, except for a few change of clothes that my mom was able to grab, put in a little, one of those, I call it 1940 brownish looking little suitcases. We had to start all over. We had to start all over. And you all are not starting all over, but you are at the beginning of, I think, of one of the most important things that you can do. That's to protect people's lives. And as I thought about the flood, I just thought about those poor people in California, what they're going through with. When you watch that news and you see trees just burning at will and people's lives disappearing in just a matter of seconds. And I hope that that will help you, not that you have to understand, but how important the job that you're doing. You know, I'm a firm believer that when you are on any kind of a board and is serving the public, you're there for one reason and one reason only. Serve the public. Has nothing to do with you other than your love for wanting to provide the service. You're there to serve the people. And please don't forget it. And I'm not scolding you, but just don't forget it. You're going to have your little differences of opinions with each other. Do that. But do it out of the sight of other people. When you get in here, you need to be together. But I'm telling you, in our society today, it's such a disappointment the way people conduct themselves from a public standpoint. And you don't need to do that. And I know none of you will, because I know that if I see you doing it, I'm gonna pull your coattail, okay? So thank you so very, very much for allowing me to come in and scold you just a little bit. But I only do it out of love. And that's love serving the public. That's why you're here. And never forget it. Thank you so very much.
Next, we have Kimberly, who is with one of our most important partners, the Port of Portland. Thank you, Kimberly.
Great to be with you. I wanted to say on behalf of the Port of Portland, so I'm Kimberly Branham. I'm the Chief Trade and Economic Development Officer for the Port of Portland. Have the privilege of working with Dan and a lot of people who are really supportive of and recognize how critical the work that this district does. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, to say congratulations and thank you, really. At the port, as you probably know, our mission is to create shared prosperity by promoting trade and travel and economic development. We work with a broad range of partners, public sector, private sector, foundations to think about how we're supporting a more prosperous region, a region that has increased access to quality jobs, to multi-generational wealth, and to markets across the entire world. In establishing the district, we know that the state legislature declared that this area is of not just regional significance, but is of statewide significance. And that's in part, of course, because of the environmental components of this area, but also because it contains industrial and economic base that is supported by rail connections and highways and marine terminals, and of course, the Portland International Airport. You might know or might not know that in addition to PDX, there is also behind the levee system are the Port of Portland owned Troutdale Airport, Troutdale Reynolds Industrial Park, the Portland International Center, and Vanport Wetlands. The levee system protects approximately 60,000 jobs and 2,500 businesses. This represents 1 in 10 of all jobs in Multnomah County. It boggles the mind when you think about the scope of impact. It also represents over half of all transportation and warehousing jobs in the county and 1 in 5 manufacturing jobs in the county. So why does this matter? What you're talking about and what we're talking about are quality employment opportunities. These are jobs that on average pay about $88,000 a year, supports families. And we know that for Oregonians that don't have high school degrees, that those in manufacturing make 11% or more than in other industries, particularly the service industry, and this premium rises to almost 17% for those with a high school degree. So we're talking about jobs that are accessible, that provide living wage employment opportunities, so that people can stay and prosper and grow in our region. This is particularly important because Oregon is such a trade-dependent state. In 2023, there were nearly 300,000 metric tons of cargo and 16.5 million passengers that went through PDX. We know that those numbers are increasing. And this is just to say, bottom line, that we are so grateful for the work. You are an important partner, and we wish you well in this next chapter. So thank you very much.
Next, we have Oscar Arana with NEA, who is going to make a few remarks about some of the work that NEA does and the opportunities to partner with them in your new work. Welcome, Oscar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon and happy 2025. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. Kind of just start by congratulating the newly elected board members. I really hope that my remarks today are just the beginning of additional conversations and future collaborations and even closer partnerships. My name is Oscar Arana, he, him pronouns. I'm indigenous Chichimeca from central Mexico, and I have the incredible honor to serve as NEA's Chief Executive Officer, where I've been fortunate enough to work for more than 15 years in various leadership roles. And before being selected as the CEO, I served as the Community Development Director here for more than 6 years. You're all invited and encouraged to visit NEA's incredible community center, located in our 10-acre campus in the Cully neighborhood. I'd love to personally give you all a tour and talk about our program and our programs and organizational priorities. The Native American Youth and Family Center mission is to enhance the diverse strengths of our youth and families in partnership with the community through cultural identity and education. NEA has been serving the urban Native community for more than 50 years. We have just over 160 employees, a $20 million annual operating budget, and we serve thousands of community members from infants to elders each year through our wraparound service model. A few examples of our diverse services include operating an alternative high school, the Many Nations Academy, housing supports to houseless families, developing affordable housing, providing community wealth building and economic development programs, community engagement, leadership, development and advocacy programs, after-school programming, mentoring supports, foster care services, child abuse prevention interventions, early childhood programs, and dozens of other really important programs and services that serve our region's Native community. One of our core beliefs here at NEA is that a stronger connection to cultural identity and having cultural pride improves our clients' ability to succeed in life and become self-determined. So like I said, we're located in the Cully neighborhood. Our center is right off of Columbia Boulevard on bus line 75, and our land backs up and connects to the Columbia Slough. So we are very close to you. We're practically neighbors. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I just have another meeting that I have to be here right away. So I apologize for not being there in person. But NEA's campus is located within the floodplain. So the levees that you maintain and manage protect our center from flooding. For generations, Native Americans have inhabited the Columbia River floodplain. Chinook tribes use this area to hunt and fish, and traveled between the Willamette and Columbia rivers via the more shallow waters of the floodplain. Not too long ago, actually, there was a thriving Chinook fishing village called near Chokiku before NAEA's campus existed. So near Chokiku was a native encampment and gathering site near the confluence of the Columbia and Willamette rivers here in Northeast Portland. For centuries, Native Americans from tribes throughout the area came to this land to gather, trade, and build community. Some of the primary sources of food included salmon, sturgeon, and camas. It's one of the reasons why previous NAEA leadership actually asked for permission and received permission from tribal leaders before moving into our current space. We have really enjoyed partnering with your organization's executive director through our Kanima project. Thank you so much, Jim, for your leadership and engagement in our project. Kanima means place of canoes, and the project was originally designed to ensure that NAEA's campus was going to be a permanent place and a permanent home for the Native community. The first phase of that project was completed when NAEA retired its campus mortgage in June 2023. So we're now really in that phase 2 of the Kanima project, where we're continuing to host conversations with our staff, partners, and community about ways to improve and redevelop our campus so that it continues to support our community for future generations. The buildings our campus is located in date back to the 1950s and 1970s. So there's a lot of challenges with aging infrastructure, buildings that are reaching their end of their useful life, a lot of space constraints, and limitations preventing accessibility for our staff and community. So we just really look forward to continuing to partner with you as we craft and then implement a beautiful vision of what our campus could become in the future. We believe in our location and our land are really critical resources, or could be very critical resources, or perhaps even a resilience center for our community to access in times of emergencies or unexpected challenges in the future. So thank you again. Thanks for the opportunity to hear a little bit about our work, about NAEA, and how we connect to each other.
Thank you so much for your time, Oscar, and we look forward to working with you more as we go forward. Folks, I think now we turn it to Wendy to administer the oath of office, and then things get real.
Oh, boy. Board members, so the notary book is going around, if you could do that, and also you have your oath of office in front of you. So what I thought we'd do, all the board members stand to take their oath, and we'll do it all together. So I'm just gonna read part of the phrase and you can repeat back. So I state your name, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Oregon.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States, state of Oregon.
And that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of Director of the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District. And that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
The duties of Director of the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, everyone. I will, we want to give you all an opportunity to speak, and we also, since we have you all in the room before we transition to the next session, would also like to take your photos. So, Jeff.
We could flip a coin. I don't know. Why don't we start with you, Eric, and go around the table this way and get remarks for whatever it is you want to say. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, well, entirely sure what the desire is at this point, but I'm pleased to have the opportunity to continue to work toward bringing the, I guess, the vision of the legislature for creating the district, bringing it kind of fully into operation, and look forward to it being successful going forward, being able to serve not just the managed floodplain, but the greater region as well. Look forward to working with the rest of you.
Yeah.
I work in wildfire resilience, and I was actually down in Santa Barbara last week because we do a lot of focus in California when the fires broke out, and learning about and being in all these briefings about the reality of this fire, the conditions of the land in a drought, the wind, 100-mile-per-hour winds, conflagration at a community level when those structures are burning so hot, and then the fact that the water systems were nowhere near built for what they faced. This is not really an avoidable thing. And I, this week stepping into this role and thinking about that we are in advance planning for and have been for many years how to fortify our systems as well as we can for flood safety in this region has kept me inspired to have an outlet further. And I always harken back to with any of my work in climate adaptation and resilience, a quote from Colette Pichon Battle, who is a survivor of Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana and an environmental lawyer. And she thinks of our collective work as if you're not all right, I'm not all right. And that makes me think of what Bill said earlier of it is about the people. We have to consider the land and all living things. And that's the work I hope to do with you all in the really structural ways. So thank you.
In addition to what we do, one of the things I'm particularly interested in is how we do it. And I think that's just as important to the community. And I'm hoping, in a nutshell, in addition to delivering on our mission and providing that public service, is that we can also be a role model and strengthen the public's trust in civic government, that we can solve problems and deliver service.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lori Stegman. I was thinking about, like, right now at the county where I continue as a director for the Youth and Family Services Division, we are concerned about the temperatures dropping. Usually about end of January, February is when we get snow, possibly, and we open up emergency sites and centers. And so, and listening and hearing about the fires, whether it's flood, fire, weather, the work that this board is called to do has probably never been more, because there are just so many more natural disasters that we were never exposed to. And so, at the end of the day, I think it's already been said, is that I'm here to help and protect people. So, and just an homage to some of you who may remember Kim Peoples, who used to work at Mount Lemmon County. So in 2017, when I came on as a county commissioner, I'd worked with Kim, and he brought, like, this was just an inkling in somebody's eye, right? He's like, yeah, we want to go to the legislature, we want to maybe have this bond. And so to see this really come to fruition after all these years is really, really pretty remarkable. And there's so many people, all of you in the room probably, that have been all involved for so long in all the previous boards and different iterations. So it's just really exciting to finally see that this has happened, and we have a real board, and we have real money, and we're going to do real things. It's not monopoly money anymore.
I am both honored and excited to be a part of this new board. And I think I agree with a lot of what has already been said, but for me, I think it's very important to think about the health of the watershed that is protected by the levees and the environment. And I'm looking forward to figuring out what the watershed plan looks like as we build it, and how the work that we do to protect the people in the industry that's here can also work in conjunction with also protecting, enhancing our environment.
I find myself in agreement with, I think, nearly everything that has been said. I likewise feel like it's an honor to serve on this board with all of you. Certainly Kimberly spoke well to the significance that the work of this board plays for the Port of Portland and building shared prosperity for the region. And that's a perspective that I will represent. But I am also very much struck by Ed's admonishment that this work is for the people, and it's both the why and the how. And I intend to keep that in mind.
It's not a whole lot I can add that hasn't already been beautifully said. So thank you all. I'm super honored to be part of this. I am like a fourth generation person living in the floodplain. My sister has kids, so now there's 5 generations of us out here. And all of that is exclusively possible because of the flood protections and the flood preventions that have been put in place for a really long time. And I want to keep seeing that going, like that's incredibly important that all of us can feel as safe, as I did growing up. I never thought about it, and I want everyone in this area to be able to feel that way. And I also appreciate the calling back to the environment and environmental stewardship of this area as well is incredibly important. The balance, bringing the balance to everything, I think is really good. So I'm excited to work with all of you. I'm very grateful for the boards that came before and all of the work that was to set this up in the background. I'm excited to go forward.
Some of you are either incredible extemporaneous speakers or thought more about what you're going to say today. I just want to say, I've been in public service all of my career. I'm not there yet, but I can actually see the end of that, which is staggering, but exciting, much like this is exciting. The public service aspect of it really drew me to this work or to this position. In particular, the expansion of the district or the board's scope to consider, the environment, cultural history, all of that sort of stuff is the type of government that I want to be, a participant in. So I'm excited to be here and that have the opportunity.
Thank you all. And incredibly, you're ahead of schedule. So this is a very good omen. I'm
Not for long.
reality again. Well, we need to call our meeting to order.
I would like to pause and do the photo,
Okay,
just.
I'm good with that. Let's do it.
Great, thank
No
you.
time like the
Everyone
present.
can stand and we're gonna do it over here. Rose.
I was gonna say, I feel like we're all fairly similar in
I'll
height.
try and warn you in the future for making your picture.
Oh.
I know, but
I'll say that.
Are we facing?
Yeah, look.
That's amazing.
What are they doing?
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so I take a couple pictures here. All right, 1, 2. Thank you. Right, yeah, everyone. Thank you.
Selling this photo is gonna be a major revenue source.
new business.
It'll be a calendar, right? Yeah.
How much of the autographed edition is going to go for?
Yeah, if you need snacks or refreshment before we buckle in for long haul, how about it?
We do have snacks.
I didn't know we were doing snacks.
Okay. Actually, it's kind of the only one, so enjoy.
Take two.
We'll take it. I love it.
If you're done with your oath of office,
You're all set. You don't get to say that very often. Pass your oaths.
Pass your oaths.
And if anyone would like a copy of it.
Take care.
This brief moment. It is an option to join the meeting on your iPads if you choose to do that in the future. There are some settings that will ask you to do. So if you ever want your face to appear as you, that's an option to do that. And what you do is join the meeting with no audio, so it doesn't cause any feedback.
You had mentioned this is a new system, so
Yes.
can we speak toward the ceiling? Is that the?
We've been testing, and as long as you're not speaking very quietly, then this one's working great for the microphone.
Report
So-
from the chat or the audio quality is good. So set that for today. I hope that it sustains. When do we need to call this meeting to order and get to that first action? I'm not sure how you want to handle that.
I can call the roll.
Okay.
Or segment. Here. Ariana Johnson. Here. And Kayla.
Yeah.
Eric Miller.
Here.
Phil Ralston.
Here.
Heather King. Here. And I can invite. Is that right?
Yes, here.
Thank you. There are no members present.
So your
There's a forum.
first task, and there's really no setup here, is to elect a president, vice president, or chair and vice chair, I think are the accurate terms. My apologies. And so I'm looking forward to turning over running the meeting to one of you immediately. And so I guess the idea here would be if any of you want to say a few words about your thinking on this, or if any of you are prepared to nominate your colleagues, I would suspect that would be a good way to get the conversation going. So does anyone, I will facilitate briefly. I don't see anyone. Eric?
Jim, I just from a context standpoint, and Allison certainly can correct me, but as I was reading about the election and the election cycle, and we're here on a special election versus the, what is it, regular designation or whatever it's called. So if I'm understanding it right, these, the elected board's term is going to expire June 30. And based on we're governed by in terms of the district election requirements, we're then required to have another organizational meeting soon after July 1st by the end of July. So I guess all of that is for me to say is I think this means we're electing people for a 6-month term. And
I
then
believe that is correct,
and then we
yes.
would need to potentially elect new folks. We could have a complete change in the electeds. Could have everybody come back or a combination. So, if you end up as a board officer, you're only stuck for 6 months. So,
You're appointed versus elected,
Government has signaled that your terms will extend beyond
I
July.
know that, but so if, I'm not saying.
Sorry.
I'm not so sure that's true, Eric, because the bylaws specify that the term of the chair is a year. So
sure it doesn't get reelected.
then there would be the need for another.
I think it's fair to say there is an opportunity for flexibility if you are elected now and would like to make a change. Okay, so I think there are processes involved for that.
But typically, the chair would serve for 1 year is the term.
Questions? Regrets for the confusion around the statute. We were stuck between trying to advance the consolidation and the statute that's in place that governs all special districts in the state of Oregon. So.
I have a comment. I'll just sort of reveal bias I have that as an appointed person versus an elected person. I kind of have a bias toward having an elected person, elected chair this first round as a way to honor the voters' participation and intent to send representatives to this board. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. But that's sort of a bias I had was voters may feel a little closer to this board and a little more, there's going to be more responsiveness from this board to voters. And they may feel like their vote was worth it if they see one of their elected officials actually as an officer. Just a thought I had.
So does that mean you're unvolunteering? It's just one perspective I had.
I tend to agree with that perspective that Phil offered, but I mean, I will also say, I think it's important that somebody be interested in serving, have the capacity to serve, and I think it's also important, given that we're at the beginning of this board, that it be somebody who, can sort of take on the position somewhat seamlessly in terms of presiding over our meetings.
That vein, wonderful Lori is incredibly experienced. And I think she would be a wonderful leader to learn under as a newer member to the board, as a chair to help guide us as we start. So move to elect Lori Easting.
A second.
I would second that.
Do we need to ask Lori?
I think Lori, look at
Discussion now. Perhaps you'd like to say something.
I would be honored to do it, but if there's someone else that has a burning desire to do it, I would defer to them. I mean, yes, I do have experience, but I also think it's important to give people an opportunity to step up and to grow. I think we're going to be voting on chair and vice chair. Is that right? So I am happy to serve in whatever role the group would like, but I also like to give people opportunities. That, maybe you wanted to be a chair and I'm totally fine with that. So I would be happy to serve. So it's either way.
Like to see how a board meeting runs before I know I'm gonna start trying to run one personally. I know there's a couple of us who are quite new to this, so I would love for people who have much more experience to be.
Do we have a motion and a second for a vote to elect Easting chair? Is there any additional discussion?
So you can do voice vote if easier.
I'm feeling confident that this is going to pass, but it's just me. I don't know. Let's find out. You guys have a choice to do a voice vote on this matter, or we can do a roll call vote. Those who want a voice vote? All right, all those in favor to elect Lori Easting as chair, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
It might be a short-lived 6 months.
Appreciate your willingness to serve and look forward to staffing you effectively. The next order of business is to elect a vice chair. Same. Game here. Oh yeah, Lori, you're it.
Hey.
Cute.
All right, as Jim said, we're going to discuss, thank you.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's how you know. Serious.
So we will be electing a vice chair, so I'll open it up for discussion, potential nominations, or anyone that might like to volunteer.
Madam Chair, I'd like to nominate one of our appointed directors to provide balance, have a vice chair from the appointed group. So Phil, if you're willing within your,
I'm willing.
between singing grandpa and grandpa duties, if you've got the time and are willing to,
Yeah, I'm willing. Absolutely.
Are there any other potential nominations?
Second.
Dan?
I would be happy for you to do it.
It's been motioned, and I think there was a second.
Yeah.
Second, Nick. to elect Phil as the vice chair. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Abstentions?
Aye.
Okay. Abstention or opposition?
Abstention, but I'm happy to serve.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Motion carries. Congratulations, vice chair.
Thank
Okay,
Budget committee chair.
that comes.
Does it come later? Sorry. I'm just so
Too
excited.
keen.
Okay,
Great.
I want to support you since you're just new. I think we're moving into the financial authority designation and our CFO.
Gloria, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So in your packet, you have a resolution that talks about delegation of financial transactions. This document is being updated solely because everyone's titles in the existing document said MCDD, Executive Director, MCDD, Chief Financial Officer. So there's no other changes to the authority, but we can walk through this just really quickly. For checks up to $75,000, we have one signature on those checks, and that signature actually automatically prints on the check, and that is my signature. I review the check registers before the team is allowed to just print any of those checks. We also are authorized to pay electronically, so a lot of our vendors will take ACH payments. I also review the file that includes all of those payments and sign off on it prior to issuing those payments. If we have a payment that is more than $75,000, that takes a second signature, and we do have a process that individual will also review those documents and sign off on them prior to distributing. And then we have a process where we move funds between accounts. So we have a separate bank account, for example, for payroll. And so when we pay a payroll, we need to move funds into that account to be able to cover the payment of all of our folks' paychecks. So we also have a process here that talks about which employees are allowed to make those fund transfers between our accounts. All of that financial activity gets reviewed by a second person, either myself or the finance manager, prior to that work being performed. So this is hopefully an easy one to take a look at, but I'm happy to answer any questions about our financial controls if you have questions prior to taking a look at the resolution. Eric?
I just was going to say, this is familiar. This is what we had adopted in the interim board back 2 years ago. I lose track exactly when, but all the same structures, all the same controls. And as far as I'm aware, and based on the audits that were produced, there's not ever been any issues or concerns raised. So I see this, just as you had mentioned, fixing titles, fixing organization names, and then continuing a existing successful process.
Change it later if you would like.
Jim also teased me when they had the final interim directors meeting, when he passed out the cheese board, somebody called them, the little plaques of that I was the one that had the record for making the most motions.
We're grateful for that.
In that vein, I would continue by saying, Madam Chair, I would move to approve Resolution 250101, approving the authorization and delegation of financial transactions. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 2025-0101. Do I ask for any discussions? Yeah. Is there any discussion, questions, comments, concerns? All right. With that, all those in favor of approving resolution 2025-0101, updating the authorization and delegation of financial transactions, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion carries.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about budget. Just some of the little things that we have to do under Oregon local budget law each year to get started with our budget process. So what we're going to take a look at first here is a budget calendar. I think we talked about this a little bit in our training session in December. But I'm going to go ahead and just pull up the key dates for you so that you can take a look at this. So we will be taking a look later today at the current year forecast. And then on March 20th is when we have our first budget committee meeting. And that's when you will be taking a look. We will be presenting to you the proposed budget. So that proposed budget book, which is fairly thick, I'll warn you right now, will be sent to the board no later than March 13th. So that will give you a week to take a look at that proposed budget and start to see the things that are in there. I will also make sure that you get my slides at that point. So you'll be seeing what I'm going to be pointing out as the key items that are included in the budget. Any budget changes that you would like to make can be proposed by the budget committee meeting, the budget committee members, which is all of you as board members at this meeting. So if there is something that you see in the budget that you would like to make a change, we can talk about that and you can make that proposal at that meeting. Then we are scheduled for budget approval on April 17th. And again, any updates that we make to the proposed budget at that proposed meeting will be sent to you in advance by April 10th. So you'll be able to see if there has been anything that has changed before we'll ask you to approve that budget. We have our TSCC hearing on May 19th. So in order to allow them to prepare for the meeting, we need to get our approved budget document to them by April 18th, which is the day after you're scheduled to approve the budget. We will be receiving the questions. I think we talked about this in December. The TSCC committee sends us questions about our budget book and we'll receive those no later than May 12th. So we'll have a week to prepare and be able to kind of formalize our answers for that hearing. And then we are scheduled for budget adoption on June 5th. You've got a little bit of time. So if there are some concerns about the budget, we just need to adopt the budget by June 30th in order to continue legal operations and spending money on July 1st. So are there questions about this or concerns about this schedule?
I think we will start earlier next year. But since you weren't really board members until now, we are starting a little bit late. So.
Exactly. We'll talk a little bit about that when we start to talk about budget priorities. Normally, we would start in the fall and talk about the types of things that you really want us to prioritize in the budget and do some planning around that prior to us starting our development of the proposed budget. But I didn't have you in the fall. So here we are. And we are hoping that we can provide you enough information that we can move forward with this budget. So,
Quick question about the opportunity for the public to have visibility into a draft budget comment. Where would that fit in this schedule?
so we have room for public comment at the proposed budget meeting and also at the budget approval meeting. And so the timeline is that we also will have the proposed budget book out on the website and available for here at the Office for Public Review after we send it out to the board.
And public is also invited to testify at the TSCC hearing.
Correct. Thank you, Chair. Speaking of public comment, I'm noticing there's not an opportunity on the meeting agenda for public comment on non-agenda items. I think
Good catch. That will be repaired going forward.
Yeah, so that's at the discretion of the board. So Oregon law requires boards to be open access so people can listen to the meeting. There's no requirement for participation. So that's at the discretion of the board. If you'd like to add that as a regular standing item, that's fine. And certainly as topics warrant, you can also add it that's specific to that agenda item. So it's totally up to you. We haven't had any participation from the public or very minimal.
to date. So sometimes your agendas are quite packed. And so even adding that 5 minutes to as a placeholder is challenging in terms of the schedule.
Did the interim board play a role in the kind of like input prior to them being complete with their service last year that we would play this next year in terms of budget input?
So the interim board adopted the budget that we are using in the current year and went through this entire process as far as budget development last year.
So at the end.
Yes, for this current year budget, the interim board went through this entire process a year earlier than today to develop the budget that we're using currently.
Right. I was meaning at the end of their tenure last year, did they have input into the process that was used for this budget?
This budget runs through June 30th.
Right, but the one that we are going to be reviewing.
No,
Okay.
We are building off those ongoing priorities. You won't see giant shifts in the proposed budget. You'll see a few things. Our emphasis will be on planning because we do not have the resources or the right policymakers to do planning. But all of that has been contemplated. We went through a very detailed exercise as the ongoing members will reflect setting up the initial budget with a fairly long range forecast, 5 years or so. So we have a pretty good blueprint for at least until you change it, what I'm working with. Good question.
Then I would go back to the discussion around public comment. If this board feels like that's something we want to include. Did you have something?
Oh, I just also want to add that in the public notices, we do have a provision to contact staff if someone would like to speak. And so we would maybe know ahead of time if someone wanted to speak.
It's,
As a last minute too.
yeah, I mean, and I realize that, you know, we have a tight schedule, but I guess I'm just kind of working in a public body where I think it's appropriate to, and rarely, never did we ever have anybody. But, you know, I think giving people that opportunity because I think we're going to do some easy work, but people might have questions and to not give the public that opportunity to address this board, I think would be inappropriate. It's just my feeling. Eric, did you have something? I thought you had something. Yeah.
Well, I guess the thought I had was I thought that some of this Wendy is going to be maybe addressing this more so in a coming meeting with the bylaws and the public meeting information and so forth. So, I mean, it's not that we have to decide it today, but that, you know, there's going to be a chance to dig into it a little more.
I am hearing a clear consensus that we should provide opportunities if we have interest in public comment. And I think as you go through your bylaws and your public meetings policy, you can codify how you want to go about that. But we will certainly inform you if we have interest and we can see if people from the public have joined the meeting. We don't have any today.
And the meeting is publicly posted. So, I mean, anybody that has an interest knows that it's happening and has a way to contact.
So unless instructed otherwise by a majority of you, we will start to plan for a portion of time at every meeting for public comment, and we'll look forward to working with you on that public meetings policy at an upcoming meeting.
Yes. I misrepresent something, Wendy. You looked
No,
uncomfortable.
there's more detail I can share with you.
Okay.
I appreciate the sentiment, so thank you.
and we did have some public comment last year during our TSCC hearing. We had a couple of written comments that we will do for the record. So, yes.
And I was on the TSCC, do you usually have board members who presents at the TSCC?
We typically have board members that support us in answering the questions for the TSCC hearing. So, yeah.
You said it was like predetermined questions with kind of predetermined answers.
It's predetermined questions. And like I said here, you will get those about a week before the hearing. And then staff works to draft the responses to those questions. And then we'll work with the board to determine who is the best person to provide the response. And then that person gives an opportunity to make edits to the response if they have other things that they would like to include in the response.
What time that would be? That
Yeah.
It's May 19th. We've got it scheduled with the TSCC and I believe it's at 1 o'clock. Checking.
Well, that'll figure
12
out.
p.m.
12 p.m.
12 p.m.
And where is it?
Located last year.
I think that's partly up to you. We can always use this room. I'm going to encourage you to host your meetings in different places, but that's again going to be up to you.
Is it the TSCC virtual? Or
No, they'll be in person. They'll be coming here in person.
different than we had for the interim?
They were in person
They
at
were in
before, a
person
few of them.
before last year.
Didn't realize that.
And just other TSCC things I've been on, and open it up is sometimes, I mean, like you all are the board, and so we may want to consider having multiple people. If you would like 2%, is there?
We typically do that.
Spread the answers around.
We spread the joy.
All right, so you're all being put on notice that you will be participating in the TSCC hearing, so.
I will
mark that.
not, I will be in Scotland.
Okay.
And we honestly try to pick topics based on the topics that are of interest to each of our board members. So if someone's interested in environmental work, for example, the environmental questions we would ask them to.
I think I answered an environmental question last year. It's very easy. It's not stressful.
It's not.
No. Here's your answer. They ask, you're like, oh. I asked if there. And you go like this, Lori.
Like, that's an excellent question. I'm going to turn it over to Lori.
Now, if you just want to note a comment in the chat moment, and I'm excited to report that we're preparing an offer for a new public engagement person. So I would tend to agree with you. Do more work in that space for sure. So thank you for raising that.
So at this point, there is a draft motion for you all to consider approving this budget calendar.
I move to approve the budget calendar as presented.
Second.
I missed it. The motion? Okay, so there is a motion by Kayla and a second by Eric to approve the draft budget calendar. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the budget calendar, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
Okay, we have two more things related to the budget, and one is the budget officer. There's a resolution included in your packet that names me, yours truly, as your budget officer, which means I will be responsible for working with our team and making sure that we get your proposed budget all put together, that it's balanced and has all of the information you need to be able to review it. And that I am accountable for making sure that that information gets presented to you so that you understand it and are able to make some decisions about that budget. So I would ask that you consider that resolution today as well.
This is the same role that you've had for the last couple of years.
Yes, it is.
Madam Chair, I move approval of resolution 250102, appointing the budget officer for fiscal year 25-26.
Baker. Is that right?
Oh, I was reading the title, sorry.
I just want to specify. It's been. Dan. It's been moved and seconded, moved by Eric, seconded by Dan. Lori Baker as our budget officer for fiscal year 25-26. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, Lori.
Job.
Yes, last but not least, we have a budget committee, which is all of you, and you need the chairs. Hand it over to you, and you can talk about who you want amongst you to chair your budget committee meetings. Is it like some of the meetings are budget committee meet? How many budgets? So proposed budget, budget approval, and budget and are the two meetings. And there might be a third one if you want to have more discussion before you approve the budget. So 2 to 3 meetings. Chairing.
Typically, it will be within an existing board meeting, and so
Yeah.
we will convene the budget committee, and then we will adjourn the budget committee and convene the board, even though it's the same.
Sub meeting within the meeting. I see.
Anyone to volunteer, questions, nominate someone?
I move to select Eric Mueller as budget committee chair for the fiscal year 2025-2026 budget. And I checked with Eric before.
Okay.
I second that.
Yes.
All right, it's been moved by Kayla and seconded by Heather to appoint Eric as our chair. Eric, is that something you'd be willing to take on?
A role that I'm well suited toward.
Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of approving Eric as the budget committee chair, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? It passes.
And I'll abstain, given that's been the tradition so far.
All right, congratulations.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
You guys are 3 minutes ahead of schedule. It's unprecedented. We are moving in now to a conversation about the Portland Metro Levy System Project. For those of you who may be newer, this is our partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that is responsible for leveraging significant federal investment to a minimum of 100 million, probably a little more than that by the time we're all done. And with us today remotely is Colin Rowan, who is our Director of Planning and Public Affairs. And so Colin, and we have Mark Wilcox, who is our PM for the PMLS project, and deep into all of the details with the Corps. So, you ready to go? Colin?
Yes, thank you all. Colin Rowan, Director of Planning and Public Affairs. Regret not being there in person with you today. I'm going to give less than 1 minute intro for Mark and Amber's presentation, but just really quickly, this Portland Metro Levy System project is in partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers. The effort to get this project underway started over a decade ago. Through the coalition of partners at the regional level, making requests to our Oregon delegation with the leadership of Senator Wyden, really to ask the federal government to take a look at our system, identify any vulnerabilities, and to find if there's a federal nexus overlap where there's a federal interest in reinvesting in the system. And so we were awarded in 2018 that a study to determine that. Fast forwarding a few years, we've been able to have a successful feasibility study that identified where those vulnerabilities were, finding that federal interest, and actually having a congressional designation through the Water Resources Development Act of 2022 that authorized the construction of this project. So we've been making really good progress. It takes all parts of our organization, all departments are very heavily involved. Mark Wilcox is our project manager, keeping all of those different pieces moving forward. And Amber Ayers is leading our real estate effort, which is a really important component. And so starting today and over the next few meetings and really over the next few years, you'll be hearing a lot of updates, especially from Mark and Amber, as we're really front loading a lot of this effort with the Army Corps of Engineers is our responsibilities around real estate. So Mark's going to give an introduction overview of the project, and Amber's going to dig into the real estate introduction, and really appreciate both of them being there to review this. Thank you.
I'll say something. This is the first time we've seen the little.
Wow.
Little Mark name.
It's hard to find.
We're all a little out of it. That's why we're all sort of
Wow.
intrigued.
That's incredible.
Where's that happy little guy?
So great.
Thank you, Colin, and thanks, Jim. I'll just do a real quick introduction. I'm Mark Wilcox. I am the project manager. I'm also going to be your translator for all things Corps of Engineers. It's a whole different language. So we thought it would be useful to kind of pass that around. for you to have this little guidebook. We're going to be expanding on it. We didn't want to throw too much at you at first, but our goal is to take you on this journey and make it a little bit less painful. There are a lot of things that are similar to capital projects that you have dealt with in the past, and then there are a lot of nuances in working with the Corps. So I'm going to give a real brief overview before Amber told us about real estate. But the real purpose here is to set you up. Real estate is a really big component of this project. And so we're going to be feeding you pieces, one piece at a time, from a strategic level to tactical levels, and things that affect the budget and various expenditures and approvals. So this is your initial primer. And so I'm going to talk really briefly about the overall project.
Yeah, just a point of inquiry. During these presentations, how would you guys like us to be involved or not? You want us to hold questions to the end or interrupt for clarification? I don't want to interrupt.
I think generally I'll try to leave some space for that at good break points, but certainly if there's something where you just need a quick clarifying, please put your hand up. And because again, sometimes this nomenclature, we are so accustomed to it, we don't want you to be lost in some terminology that you may not be familiar with.
If I don't see you, just ask a question.
Okay.
This is meant also to be kind of high level. We want to really set the stage because there will be some policy decisions and different things that you guys will need to make along the way. So really, this is kind of your first little piece of it.
For the sake of time, I think the agenda is pretty clear. It's going to be a fairly short, high level presentation. So I'm going to dive right into it.
Go right ahead.
For you. Okay. So the overview, and you'll see on the back of this, I had a blank page. So I also gave you this snappy overview of the project, and I'll explain that in a minute. But as Colin said, this is the study is we're about, well, I've been here as long as this study. Essentially, we started this process. First, the feasibility study, which was a 3-year study, and that got us to a federally authorized project. This is your first glossary term, meaning that a project was deemed adequate for federal funding and then later appropriated for federal funding. So, so we're about 5-ish years into this process and looking to improve the resiliency and redundancy of the system, as well as address some of our major flood protection challenges with an eye towards the 50-year horizon. So that includes addressing climate change and things like future hydrology. And so that's the overriding purpose, because we have other needs. And the question is as well, why doesn't the Corps address all of our needs in this? And certainly there has to be a cutoff. The Corps' project is not intended to address things like deferred maintenance that the federal government perceives as deferred maintenance. It doesn't intend to address some of sort of our local needs, but it is intended to bring this federal investment back up to modern standards and address our needs, major needs for the next 50 years. And in doing so, you can see the district objectives down there. We happen to be assisting with some of our needs to stay in compliance with the rehabilitation inspection program, meet the O&M manual, and to it'll help us meet our needs to stay within the National Flood Insurance Program through FEMA. So it's not curing all those things. There are some other things that are going to be addressed by projects within the general obligation bond, things that the federal government by policy couldn't include in this project, but it's really addressing the lion's share and the really big ones that we needed to invest in. So what does that mean? So that means we're implementing improvements and upgrades to about 31% of the perimeter levee system. I'll show you on the map briefly. It's very widespread. And then 2/3 of a mile of flood walls, and those are primarily in Penn 1. And then we are addressing a mile of cross levee right out here, just north of our location on the cross levee between Penn 2 and MCDD, which was deemed necessary to protect a very large part of our system from cross flooding in the event of a major situation. There's gonna be 3 pump station replacements. They were initially slated to be 1, but in the process, we figured out that you just can only fit so much into a small box. So 2 of the boxes that were just planned for upgrades are going to be completely replaced. And then additional smaller measures on the remainder of our external pump stations. That last thing, cost share credit. I didn't quite put it on your glossary, but I'll explain that in a minute. But essentially, we were proactive and already completed one of the projects that was within the study scope. And so we will get credit for that in our cost share credit. This is just, again, you have this map. The intent of this is a really quick high-level overview. We will show you this again and we'll tell you, you know, we'll give you the full detail in terms of what this represents. But essentially, we have 14 major components, and those are clustered into different packages. And the work is spread throughout the system. It really benefits the entire system, even though it doesn't look like there's a lot in MCDP basin. That cross levee, and there's a perimeter levee section, and there's a little overtopping section. They all protect our investment there, and particularly from a cross flooding event and some pump station improvements. So anyway, the work is throughout the system. It benefits the east end, the west end. There is a lot of work in the western end, but due to historical and legacy sort of problems, but the work spans throughout. And then my last slide, just to really throw a lot at you. You know, some people are concerned about putting too many words on the slide. Here we have too many colors. The intent is not to go through this Gantt chart with you. The intent is just to show you the level of complexity of this project. It is a very large project. There are many components. But what I really want to draw your attention to is that package 1, Station 511. We are looking to get we have federal authorization for both the design and construction phase of this project. That doesn't mean we have appropriation for all the construction yet. We're hoping to put forward Station 511. It's a very small, low spot project. It's a very low risk spot and an easy project to start with and get this whole federal machine rolling. And we hope to sign a construction agreement or project partnering agreement next spring if we can stay on schedule, which again, it's a low cost risk, low schedule risk segment. And we hope to start that at that point. So you can see sort of there's various elements. These elements will shift. We're just at 30% design with a lot of these things, and we're going to find some cost savings. We're going to find some challenges. We're going to find some schedule challenges. We're going to find some design challenges. We're working in an urban environment with a lot of, in some cases, community members, in some cases, the railroads, all present challenges, which is why we needed the federal government to begin with. So, but big takeaway, next spring, we hope to get started with the smallest increment, and then we hope to follow on with one of our most important elements, the infamous railroad embankment.
Looking at your colors, the next spring, is that the dark blue? Is that what you're meaning on that package? 1, 5, 6, 5, 11.
You can see, sorry, the contracting and construction, the sort of the reddish, brownish red. Yeah, that's at the point at which we'll sign the project partnering agreement and move forward into construction.
Calendar year 2026.
By next year, I think we're getting it. Yeah, you don't mean like next spring, not the one that's coming up in 2 months.
Correct, sorry.
Spring of
Yes.
2026.
That's what I was slowly
Yeah,
getting.
yeah. I had the same thought.
Oh, April, May.
That's very soon.
2 days away.
Clarification, or when I'm not making sense. So
Great.
at that point, I guess I'm going to shift it over to Amber unless you have any other clarifying questions. Well, certainly if you have a board agenda item about this project, if you have more questions, clarifications that we can't answer between board, or you think there are things that would that you would benefit from a special sort of tech timeout during one of these meetings, we can certainly address any specific topics in greater detail. Just let us know what you need.
Yeah, maybe before we move on, make sure that we've got all our questions from our week back, but I just want to make sure we're all.
One like super quick clarifying question. So the 50-year timeline or the 50-year, protection period, when does that start? Like we've got 6 years on the calendar up there. When does the clock?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just speaks to the modeling that was conducted, particularly looking at sort of the climate data and the build out data for the basins. And so what everything was based on. The study was published in 2020. So it's not an exact science, of course. And if you look at these periods of federal investment come sooner and later than 50 years. So we've had different intervals throughout the year, but that's our hope that these changes will keep us in good hands for the next 50.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
just
You're gonna speak, could you join
move over here. A quick update we saw Eric at the end of our briefing have a scrunchy face, I think was how it was described, because we had originally hoped to sign this project partnership agreement with the Corps this spring. And so I just want to emphasize the challenges of the schedule and particularly working with the federal government. So we had surprised Eric with that news at your onboarding session. So that's on me. But I want to emphasize to you, we're doing our best to keep you informed about schedule and costs. I think things are likely to take longer and cost more. So I just want to tell you that we're going to be very transparent with you about that and reward our staff for telling us the truth when they come upon these challenges. So I just wanted to address that because I had heard about it from a few folks. And again, the schedule is moving and we look forward to getting into a routine with you where you get the information you want and need in a timely way. So I regret surprising you, Eric, and wanted to just reflect on that from the entire board.
On the topic of schedule and appropriations, does the new administration pose any threat to this project specifically with the Army Corps in terms of timeline or appropriations?
Yeah, what a question. I think this administration raises all kinds of threats. I'm going to be candid. At the same time, the Water Resources Development Act and appropriations for the Corps of Engineers have historically been very bipartisan. And so we are hopeful because the Corps invests in districts all across the nation on really critical infrastructure that and tradition of bipartisanship around these investments will continue. I will say we have an excellent relationship with the Corps, with the Office of Management and Budget, with the congressional delegation, with the support of our partners at the port, the city of Portland, and the other cities in the region. So we are optimistic and we will need to work hard to continue winning this federal investments.
Yeah, sure. Quick question. When we have presentations like this, which this is really helpful, so I appreciate it. Thank you. One of the things that goes through my head is there a decision that the board's going to need to make, say in the next 6 months, that this information is going to support?
Yes.
So
I'm getting.
Oh, Amber's your expert on that.
And one more question, do we have these slides?
Don't yet.
We can send them
So
out.
we generally try and have them ready for the packet, but I'll send them
No
out.
worries, I just, because I didn't see them.
Okay, we will try and get them in your packet. Sometimes we're up to the last minute. We will always share them after the meeting if they were not included in your packet.
And I think also moving forward too, that there will be, especially when we're talking about real estate things, we may need to go into some executive sessions and talk about specific properties and transactions. And so you had a lot on your plate today. And I think that this is you will be seeing Mark and I probably come back to you pretty frequently.
Dan had a question.
Just a clarifying question. I noticed on the map for the one call out box, it notes that it's raising the levee low spot by 2 feet. Are there other places where the height of the levees is actually being raised?
Yes.
One is part of this.
Yes, there's, and I'm going to at some point come and give you a complete overview. Some of this is actually, I can put a link in to some overview maps of all the different measures so that if you want to dive deep, it's available on our, it should be available on our website or the Corps' website. But this most substantially, there are places where Corps standards require a little extra freeboard. And so we're addressing those. So not to say that they're below our target, our current target objectives, but in doing this project, we're raising the western end of the system much higher to match the level of protection in the eastern end of the system. So in places in Pen 2, for instance, we'll be raising it 18 inches to 3 or 4 feet.
We will be organizing a tour for you all when the weather's better. If you'd like to go out in the colder, wetter weather, we're happy to take you anytime as an individual or as a group. We will plan a group tour for you. That's in the works.
Wendy, did you have something? Okay. I think we've asked our questions. Amber will try to.
Excellent. Well, this is kind of a good segue, this Gantt chart. You can see right now that everybody is in the data collection phase. We have been in for a couple of years. And so I'm going to let you know kind of what we've done in the past and then kind of what we're expecting to do moving forward. I showed this slide because I really want to let you know that we have a long-standing history of having existing real estate holdings throughout the district. A lot of these span from the early 1900s all throughout. They all have a varying degree of clarity and I would say precedence in terms of how they could be implemented today. A couple of years ago, we had about all 800 of our existing holdings kind of get a nice legal review. They ranged from not very relevant at all to, you know, a really solid agreement that we could do anything from access, O&M to repair and rebuild of the levee if we needed to. But a part of those old tools has just been a lot of gaps in our records. And we really don't have a ton of new avenues for obtaining new easements through our development review program is one outlet that we have. We have agreements with different jurisdictions where new development is happening within anywhere in the district. They kind of alert us and they work with us to make sure that maybe something is not negatively impacting the system. And through that, kind of working opportunistically as with landowners to maybe fill in some of those gaps. So that's something kind of that I think kind of got me pulled in. I helped Bill and the development review team with those. But wanted to show you that we do have an existing tool set. We've had in-house counsel as well as outside counsel create us a whole new templates that was really helpful. Everything from license agreements to access to O&M and a full flood control easement over a property that has much greater restrictions that align with what the Corps' expectations are. Go ahead. Just a quick glance, these are a couple of those documents. They're obviously getting revamped with the new district and we've already had legal review those and make those changes. Go ahead. I wanted to quickly mention the easement gap analysis. So this was also conducted a couple of years ago. So I said that we had all 800 of our existing holdings kind of reviewed. We also took the footprint from the PMLS study and intersected it with all of the properties. We have all of those maps. We can go into greater detail at those soon. Those will probably take an executive session for us to review and discuss. But what came out of that is you'll see on these figures that we do not have all of the real estate holdings that we anticipate needing to do the work that the Corps' expectations are. And so that has come out of an extensive title research, extensive legal review, and we have been working a lot with the Corps to raise those issues and to think about through creative outlets that we can get credit for. And so things like Mark has mentioned, the PPA, that kind of starts a timeline for us where we can maybe start to get credit for some of us going out and implementing our real estate acquisition plan. And so, but you see there is a lot of risks through there. And so we are working with them on that. And then I'm going to keep moving here. Right now, operations and maintenance. So it allows our operations crew to go out and do mowing, limbing, different things on a property. Currently, we're filling in all of the gaps through with survey work. I think you'll be seeing me probably come even next month with some task orders related to some real estate support services, as well as some larger survey work that's going to be happening. And so all of these will be coming towards you to help us with all of this data collection that's going on right now. Mark's also just started some wetland delineation work. The Corps needs all of these tools before we can really progress the design. And I have real progress to start making on reaching out to landowners and creating outreach plans and things like that. So I really just wanted to highlight that this is going to be kind of an ongoing step for you all. I think that next month, as you've heard, the PPA with the Corps really triggers that federal process to really get going. Until then, if I was to say maybe go out and start filling in these gaps, we could potentially doing that at risk. They might not give us. There's only one property this year that we know that we need to just have a fee for title and actually acquire outright. It's a little property out in the former Penn 1 area. I plan to come to you guys in the next couple of months with the resolution of needs so that we can maybe start the appraisals on that. We're going to be filling in all of our unknown data gaps. We're working with the Corps on, they have their own boilerplate templates that they're very strict about us using. It doesn't always work for us for maybe thinking about being the long-term steward of these places. And so we're working a lot with their real estate team to try to see what we have any flexibility on. And then, of course, lots of questions with property owners. We're working with stakeholders through all the jurisdictions, as well as like the IBR and different things.
Bridge replacement?
What?
Interstate bridge replacement?
Yeah. So we have overlapping properties where the property owners could be impacted for a couple of years by both of our projects. And so we're just trying to do that in the most efficient way possible. And then also Common Street Consulting has come on and helped us a lot. They're going to be putting plans and processes in place. It's going to be helping us all better understand the acquisition process. They've offered to do a real estate 101 for you guys later in the spring. Essentially, what will a property owner receive? That general information notice, all of our, what would you expect as our constituents to see? So.
Rough numbers on the makeup of the property we're talking about between residential, commercial, and other?
We do have that full breakdown, and I think maybe if we get into another follow-up session, I will be happy to share the breakdown of the private, residential, industrial, right away, everything.
Yeah, I was curious, is there any particular easement, right of way, outright acquisition that sort of is the gating factor of us being able to move forward with cooperation process with the Corps that sort of we are going to need to address first? And when we might be getting to that, it's 2 weeks from now, it's 3 years from now,
Yeah, we've definitely identified some high-risk properties that present some challenges to either that we already know they will be long negotiations, or they present just a really high risk to the schedule if something happens. You will see me coming to you here very shortly with one of those properties that we know no matter what changes with the design, that is a property that we need. It's going to be right where the flood wall comes in and ties into the levee in the former Penn 1 area.
Just for the board's knowledge, we may convene you an executive session in order to preserve our bargaining abilities. So that'll all be coming sequentially for you.
Yeah, and I wanted to add as well to that, the railroad is obviously a very difficult real estate. It's what the Corps considers a non-standard estate. And so what Amber was talking about, boilerplate easements, those are standard templates. They don't require higher level review. They present no schedule risk, but the railroads are the opposite. They are non-standard agreement. That said, the Corps has put some folks that have experience working with the railroads on our project team, and we've started that early, and we'll tell you more about that in February. I did want to just, I think the one thing, I'm not going to go through this any further. I think we covered the high points, but I realized that I didn't cover one very important point, and I think you all may know this already, but when we talk about cost share, and that's stated down here, it is a 65% federal cost share. So I feel like that's, I don't want to sound like a salesman, but I wanted to make sure that struck you in case you didn't get a chance to review this. So
I think that's why we want to make sure that we get a really a clear process outlined with them on what we can get credit for and what they are already expecting us to have acquired already in our system, say from the earlier investments that they put in.
Okay, this was background for you, high level, because at your next meeting, you're going to be debating, approving a task order to continue more specific real estate related work. We'll have background information for you in your packet, but presentation from staff and an opportunity to ask questions prior to being asked to vote on that task order.
I think given the nature of that, that might require going into executive session.
Or legal counsel to determine when and how, and to instruct you on what you can and can't do in executive session.
All right, thank you. Well, we need to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, Amber. And Lori, are you here to go over the financial report?
We have two-factor authentication now, so she's authenticating.
You, Lori. Sorry, the transition between people at the table is awkward. You know, we're not.
As we have a pause, I just wanted to let you know that I have like a back injury, so I will get up and move around and walk. And I know many of us sit in meetings, so like, feel free to get up and move around. Thank you.
Yes, and if you're going to speak, I ask you to come closer to the table. You can stand, but the camera angle is only so wide. And so just for the record, it'd be great to have your visual in addition to your voice on the recording. Thank you.
Good. Good job.
Kind of shockingly gone pretty well with the technology. So congrats to there's a bunch of staff who helped make it so. Not all of them here. So thank you to Clint in particular and Wendy and Emily who have been working hard to get this all set up.
So in your board packet today, you have the November 2024 financial report for the urban district, and that has both monthly and year-to-date financial information for your consolidated district. So let's take a look at some of the key information. And I'll also just note there's a lot of reports in there. If as we work together, you find that there's missing information, please reach out and let me know. If there's information that you think is too much, let us know that too. We can make adjustments to this packet. I'm trying to make sure that you have everything you need to be able to learn about the organization. So as we go, we can make adjustments to that. And one of the things that I try to do is with that cover memo is to point out kind of the key things that have changed or that you should be aware of in each of those financial statements. So you don't necessarily have to study all the numbers. You can read through that memo. And if there's something in there that you have a question about, you can just let us know. All right, so let's talk about revenue. November starts to get to be an exciting month for us in revenue because we start to see some collections on the assessment side. So the county actually provides us with the service of collecting on our tax assessments on the floodplain. So, and those bills go out at on the same bill as the property taxes. And so we start to see those collections as people get their 3% discount. So here we are. We have $8 million in revenue now for the fiscal year to date through November, which aligns to the fact that that major source of revenue, property assessments, and the flood safety benefit fee have started collection process. The flood safety benefit fee is billed and collected quarterly, And property assessments, as I said, are collected by the county on the property tax bill, which is due on November 15th. So you can see that we've collected about $4 million in assessments through November, which is not quite half of the annual assessment amount. We've billed and collected the vast majority of the first quarter flood safety fee, which is billed directly to the cities and to the county for the unincorporated areas in the district. You'll see in December, when we walk through the December statements next time, we'll have a second billing for the quarterly flood safety fee, and you'll see that a significant portion of the assessments will have been collected by the end of December. So grant revenues through November include state grant dollars for the 13th Avenue Pipe Project of $720,000. And we also have state dollars coming in for the Gate Tower project of $544,000, and from FEMA for the PIR pump station project of $294,000. So that's what's making up the grants right now. Those are capital grants that are funding that work on those projects. Our interest rates through November were still higher than what we anticipated in the budget. That's starting to ratchet down pretty quickly now. We put all of our excess funds in the state of Oregon local government investment pool, and they have been changing the interest rate almost weekly at this point, and it is going down pretty quickly. So we anticipate that although we're over budget in interest earnings right now, we'll start to see that ramp down pretty quickly as we move through the year, as they continue to lower those interest rates. In our intergovernmental agreements, this includes almost $521,000 from the city of Portland, and we also have about $60,000 coming in from the Port of Portland through November. So that's our revenue to date. Questions on any of that? I'll keep going. So this report here shows your general fund spending results by budget appropriation line. And what that means is these are the level of budget authority that we have to comply with for Oregon local budget law. So first, you'll see the total annual budget by appropriation line. And then we've allocated that budget by month to support review of the spending levels on a monthly basis. So this column shows you the year-to-date budget allocation through November. This column shows the actual spending for the first 5 months of the fiscal year. And then the monthly variance for November year to date is in this column. So we have positive variances, which means we're under budget on every appropriation line except for debt service, which is a timing difference. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So we'll be within budget for the year for debt service, but there was a timing of one of the payments. Go back. So for the executive director, the year-to-date spending includes personnel cost and costs related to our equity consulting. The positive variance in legal is the timing of legal billings that we've received for processing. And also there's a positive variance that's resulting from the open position that's in this division. So we have an FTE budgeted for in-house counsel. That's one of the things that we talked about in December that we'll want to be working with you on. We're planning on keeping that position in the proposed budget for next year, just to give you some time to really be thoughtful about what approach you want to take with legal counsel. We currently are contracted with Miller Nash and have gotten really, really great support with them, as well as Allison Keene has been providing us with interim counsel services. And we have Armand, if any of you remember him. He worked for a while as in-house counsel here with the district, relocated, moved back to Eugene, and is working with local government law group down there. And he's supporting our real estate efforts with PMLS. So we have a really good team supporting us with our contracts on legal counsel, but certainly you all will be the ones to decide how we want to move forward with our legal services going forward. So for finance and administration, that's our administration group, IT, financial services, board services, and human resources. Our positive variance there is from 1.7 FTE in open positions and some timing differences for materials and services spending through November. Planning and Public Affairs also has a 1.7 FTE open position, which is giving them a positive variance for this year thus far as well. This division has also got timing differences for materials and services, including that $500,000 that we talked about for new responsibilities. We won't be spending that money until we have the opportunity to work with the board and have you help to guide us in what directions you want us to go with those funds. We're not anticipating that we'll spend that entire $500,000 in the second half of the year. It'll take us a while to get up and running once Colin has had a chance to really do his work with you to figure out which direction we want to go with that. Engineering and operations has a 2.2 FTE in open positions, and we're also seeing timing differences in materials and services expense for that division. All of these weird FTEs are because, not because we have a half a person that's not here, it's because of the timing. So somebody might have left part of the way through the year and then we had that position open for a while. So that'll come up with these kind of odd numbers until we get to the end of the year, and then we can talk about where we're sitting. Our HR group is working really hard to do recruiting and start to get some of these positions filled because we really do need these positions. So you'll start to see things kind of ramp up as we get those positions filled. So for general fund debt service, there were 2 debt service payments that were made through November, one to the county for our IFA loan and one to Truist Bank, which is some capital borrowing that we did through MCDD. The Truist Bank payment was actually made a week early. So thanks to my AP department, they made sure that we made it on time with our debt service. But what that did was made it look like we had a negative variance in that budget line through November. So you'll see that resolve in December because the budget for that payment was actually put in December when we did our monthly spread of the budget. In capital projects through November, we had significant activity on that 13th Avenue pipe project and on PIR pump station. So let's take a look at the capital spending, if I can find my mouse. So this is the long list.
Question, Lori.
Sure.
Thanks.
Do you want me to go back?
No, you can probably answer this pretty quickly. If the FTEs and all these general fund line items were normalized, they were full, I'm assuming that there aren't any material variances for like supplies and expenses and other non-FTE things. Okay.
We're underspending pretty much in every area, to be honest with you. And that I think is, we're really a new district and getting everything up and running. We haven't had you to work with as far as strategy on some of our spending as well. So I think what you're going to see when we go through the forecast is we're really anticipating a lot of underspending in a lot of areas. So I think it makes sense given that we were new and we were just getting everything pulled together, but that's kind of where we're at for the year.
A little bit in the weeds from your administrator's perspective too. We spent some time this summer and fall really improving our hiring and promotion policies. We didn't have a lot of that. So managing when you do an internal recruitment, when you do a career ladder, when you do a working out of class, when you recruit. And we completed all that work in partnership with our management team. And that's allowing us now to make more progress in some of these hires. But we felt like that transparency for the employees was really critical for us. And so we took the extra time to get that done.
And you'll actually see that sort of activity. There's a report within your financial reports that shows our FTEs, but also down at the bottom of that report, you'll see any major hiring or pay change activity. So when we have a career ladder promotion, you'll see that listed down at the bottom of that report so that you can see what's happening with our team as well. So. Okay, so for capital spending, this is general fund capital spending. So this is all of the things that are not the general obligation bond. It's everything else, including grant funded projects. Those go into the general fund as well. So you'll see that there was major spending to date on the 13th Avenue pipe project. So $854,000. We ended up under budget on that project. So the project cost less than what we anticipated. And so you'll see some savings that's going to carry forward when we look at the forecast on that project.
Right, that project is complete.
Yes. We have a few invoices that are still kind of sneaking through in December. So we're going to hold that in construction in progress. The construction is in complete, and now we're waiting for all that accounting stuff to come through and we can get it all finalized. So the other project that you'll see here that has a lot of activity is a PIR pump station, so almost $300,000. That is grant funded through the city of Portland. So they got a FEMA grant and they also provided us with the local match for the FEMA grant. So all of that is being funded by the city of Portland, and they've been supporting us on getting started on the design for that project.
Corey, I just wanted to do a time check because I see that you're doing a budget forecast at 4:10, so you can manage however you want between those two topics.
Yes, I am on my last slide. Thank you for the time check. And I had us going early. I'm not sure what happened here. So with the GEO bond, through November, we've only incurred $61,000 worth of staffing related costs for GEO bond projects. Our managers, we were all really working hard to finalize our planned project staffing to be able to support this capital program. So really, again, you're seeing that startup. There's a lot of work going on. You'll see a lot more. We're really projecting that this is going to start to ramp up now towards the end of the year, but there wasn't a lot of spending happening as far as project staffing through November. The costs are all direct staff costs right now for PMLS. There's also some debt issuance costs that have hit the GEO bond through November. $261,000 is what it cost for us to issue $15.7 million worth of bank debt. Keep that in mind because there's a strategy that I have about debt issuance. And so I'll be coming back to you later in the year to talk about how we want to handle the rest of the debt that we're going to be issuing for the GEO bonds, because it's expensive. If you try to break it up and just do little pieces at a time, it starts to add up. I will say, our financial advisors and our bond counsel have been working with us for years and years and years. So this was a catch up of all of that. They don't charge us for their services until we issue the debt. And so that was a lot of catch up. It wasn't like they did, a couple of days worth of work and charged us $200,000. But it is expensive to issue the bonds. So it's a balancing act when we decide how much we want to issue the next time. Just as an aside, our property owners had less than a penny per thousand on their tax bills. We had people saying, oh my gosh, it was like $1 something that I have to pay for your GEO bond debt for this year. So pretty minimal this year, and it'll be pretty minimal next year, looking at just the continued debt service for the outstanding bank debt for next year. So when we start looking at the budget, that really was a lot of relief for our taxpayers for 2 years as we move into this program.
That was sort of part of our agreement with the governor and the Portland Metropolitan Chamber to try and minimize those costs on the community as long as we could, while still completing our mission.
Jump to the next.
We do anticipate future meetings being more discussion oriented and less business like this. So thank you for your patience today. We look forward to letting you have more of the microphone time going forward.
Yes, thank you. Bear with me as we get through all of this financial stuff.
That wasn't on you.
Happening
That
on-
was just the collective needs that we have.
Does anybody need sugar before we keep on? All right, so we are, as part of our planning for the budget process, we're going to review our financial forecast now for this current fiscal year, 24-25, which ends on June 30th of 2025. Just jump right into it. So in your package, you have a detailed version of the forecasted financial results for the current fiscal year. And this is a summary of that forecast. So as we've discussed, but you probably don't remember, and I understand that. I really love accounting, but not everybody does. We have transactions that we account for in 3 different funds, and all that's just a funky accounting term for buckets of money that we're trying to keep track of. So the capital projects fund accounts for all of the capital spending that's funded by the general obligation bond. So, and anytime you see that term capital projects funds, that's just your GEO bond. The debt service fund accounts for the property taxes and the debt service on the general obligation bond. So that is the only thing that's in there is we get property taxes in to pay for that debt service. We pay for principal and interest on the debt as it is due. And right now, the only borrowing we have is bank borrowing. And then the general fund accounts for everything else. So that's our regular operations. It's also those general fund capital projects, things that are funded with grants. All of the kind of regular activity for the district is included in the general fund. So let's take a look at each fund. So this is our summary forecast for the general fund. And the top half of this schedule shows the resources or the way that we fund our spending. So overall, our resources are projected to be higher than budget, which is good news. So mainly due to positive variances in carry forward balances and balances that transferred in from the legacy district. So this first arrow that you're going to see, MCDD actually ended last fiscal year with $1.2 million more than what we had projected. So that all moved into this district. And so we're showing a positive variance from our legacy districts, the bulk of that being from MCDD. So we've got $1.4 million more than what we expected. And the bulk of that was from MCDD.
And
I'll tell you,
as a liberal artist, I want to share that these are our guesses about where we'll be June 31st.
but these are actual numbers. The transfer from
Okay,
legacy
transfer back.
district has already happened. So it's really easy for me to project that one
Yeah.
because it's already done.
Yeah.
But I will say, you may be saying like, how in the heck was she so far off and guessing how much was going to carry forward? Your strategy when you're trying to figure out a budget for carry forward dollars is not to be too aggressive, because if you assume it's going to be higher than what it ends up, then you're going to come back to your board and say, okay, what are we going to cut out of the budget because we don't have as much money to spend as we thought we were going to. So we were conservative with our estimates in where we were going to land at the end of the year. And MCDD actually performed a little bit better. And there was some weird stuff going on with some of our assessment billings with the port that we weren't sure about, and some things that kind of came through at the end of the last year. But so the good news is we have a little bit more money than we anticipated.
Those are all closed as of December 31st, like MCDD.
They're all closed as of June 30th
Okay.
of 2024. And we completed all the audits and, tied a bow around everything, and everything is done with all of those districts. So you will hear some discussion about some money that's gonna still need to be used that is designated funds for Penn 2 and SDIC. So there's a little bit of kind of carryover focus spending that we have still with our legacy districts, but we can talk about that in a minute. So in general, our variances in the other revenue areas pretty much are a wash. So most of our positive variance on the resources side is coming from that transfer of funds in. So we're anticipating our assessments are going to be a little bit more than budget. And we'll talk a little bit about compression here in a minute. Our intergovernmental agreements, some of these agreements are revenue and spending. And so there's some of the support that we're doing for, I think, the port that's a little bit less than what we anticipated, but the costs are going to be less too. So doesn't have a negative impact. The other earnings that you're seeing there, that's the interest cost that we were, or the interest earnings that we talked about a little bit here. So we're higher than budget right now with that. Okay, so on personnel services, we're projecting we're going to be almost $1.2 million under budget. And that really is due to the timing of the hiring of those positions. So we've got some open positions that we're hiring. So we're going to have some savings, one-time only savings, because it'll be for this current year. Materials and services is also projected to be less than budget by almost $1.4 million. Some of the larger variances include, like I said, we don't think we're going to spend all of that $500,000 in new responsibility money. We're guessing about $200,000 at this point. So there's $300,000 in savings there. Just to give you time to discuss and allow staff to implement that spending. We've got about $150,000 in a timing difference for watershed planning and another $100,000 in strategic planning. Just because of the timing of the work, we have to do some procurement activity to be able to get the consultants up and running. So those will be savings this year. We have another $270,000 in community education. $110,000 right now projected in savings for houseless coordination, and close to $100,000 in equity consulting because of the timing of the project work. So that houseless coordination, we have to kind of guess high on that. So the good news is our local partners have been really supportive about making sure that that our ops team is able to do their work and that we don't have issues that need to be dealt with there. So I think our new ops team manager has done a really great job of kind of continuing that outreach and working with our partners. So we've been real fortunate to not have to spend as much money there as what we anticipated.
Despite what you might read in the news, the Port and Metro and the county and the city of Portland have all really stepped up their game and are really more effective in helping manage the situation. We still have a long-term issue, a lot of work to be done, but our partners have really stepped up and are really helping us in ways that it just took a while for that flywheel to get turning. So,
yeah. All right, so on the capital side, you're seeing a $600,000 positive variance, and a good quantity of that is because of the savings that we saw on that 13th Avenue pipe project. So good news there is that we do anticipate that that's not timing, that that's actual savings. On debt service, we're going to be $40,000 under budget. With the loan with Multnomah County, the IFA loan, Multnomah County figured out the debt service schedule after we did the budget. So we made a guess. We guessed a little bit high. So we're going to see some savings and we'll correct for that in next year's budget. And then we're not anticipating at this point on spending any of our contingency dollars. We've got $985,000 in the budget for contingency. That is for emergency sort of spending and unanticipated things. So if we had a flood event, for example, this money would help to support that. We don't regularly budget for those sorts of emergencies, so contingency is what really helps us to have flexibility. And we can't use those funds unless we have your approval to do a budget transfer to be able to spend those dollars. So that is your pool of money to support us if we have unanticipated spending. All right.
we do look forward to creating a contingency policy with you.
Just a clarifying question about contingency. If there were a flood event, do you anticipate that amount in contingency would cover the additional costs, or would it only cover a portion? Yeah, so like,
Yeah, it's not enough even without a flood event.
is it halfway to enough, or 80%, like ballpark? What are we talking about?
I think if we were in a flood event, there would be FEMA grant money available, and we have an exemption in Oregon local budget law. If we have unanticipated grant revenue, you can appropriate the spending of that grant revenue without having to do a supplemental budget process. So there would be grant money available. We obviously, if there's a flood event, it's all of the local government partners that are working together to do that work. And so we wouldn't be the only ones that would be spending. But yeah, $1 million is going to be a drop in the bucket if we end up having to really respond to an emergency. But at least it allows us to continue to do the work that we need to do until we can get through a budget process and find some funding.
And sure. And maybe this is for a later discussion, but relative to contingencies and the impact or the ability for us to borrow at lower rates, do the rating agencies or the banks have expectations for contingency set asides for like 6 months operations, that kind of thing? I'll just say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the districts all had contingencies based on their assumptions of what their loan or the lending agencies would require. So I'm just wondering if there's a best practice for agencies like ours to have set asides.
Yeah, and what you're talking about really is the fund balances. So in the legacy districts, we didn't have a contingency spending line item, but we did have fund balances. It's one of the things that we'll need to work on together is our reserve policies. Like so we worked a lot with the interim board to make sure that we had the carry forward dollars, which really gave us the flexibility that we didn't have to do tax anticipation notes. So a lot of local governments have to do what they call tax anticipation notes. which is you borrow money for the first 6 months of your operation because you're not getting your tax collections until December. We don't have to do that, and that saves us a significant amount of money in interest. So that, I think, will help us with the rating agencies. The rating agencies are really concerned about PERS debt, so you spend a lot of time with that, you know, what's happening with that retirement debt. But I think they will appreciate, and I think it will help us with the rating agencies if we can pull together some sort of a reserve policy and some goals about, you know, when we don't spend our contingency, can we roll that into a capital reserve so that we start to build a little bit of cushion to be able to maintain the system. So those will be the sorts of things that we want to talk about. And I will continue to encourage you not to spend if we have excess fund balance, but to really be conservative with that and make sure that we can continue to be strong in our finances here at the organization. So.
Madam Chair, just very briefly, in the event of a flood incident, I want you to be uncomfortable about the amount of reserves and contingency we have. However, we have a great team, and we are part of the Corps of Engineers Rehabilitation and Inspection Program. And that is a bargain that we make with the federal government, that if we maintain our system to certain standards, if there is a natural disaster, the Corps will come in and repair the system using federal resources. So again, we have part of our capital program is designed to ensure we continue to be able to participate in that program. It is not without its hurdles. One of my colleagues down in the Bay Area has had a levee breach and they're working to get reimbursed. And again, it's a process, but we do have, again, help from the federal government as well in the event of a big flood emergency. So again, you should be slightly less uncomfortable, but still uncomfortable.
I think it's a good call out there at the end too, because I think a lot of us are used to operating where we have a contingency and we have a reserve, and it's usually a formula. So obviously that's something we can discuss later. And so we're all kind of like, wait a minute. Fall back on. Yeah. And so that's a greater discussion, but it's duly noted.
And we've been working hard to build up some reserves under the current situation. So we're better off than we've been, and we still need more. So.
Yeah. All right. So one of our largest sources of operating revenue for the district is our property assessments. So this schedule compares the budget to our forecast. So what we're looking at here is we start with the amount that is assessed. The difference here is just rounding because we use a rounded number for the budget, but the actual number that comes through. So this forecast number, the 11,047,240, is the actual assessment number that was calculated for this year.
That comes from the county, right?
Well, it comes from us. We say, here's how much our total assessments is. The number from the county is actually the levied assessments, so we'll get there.
Got to line down, excuse me.
Yeah. So we estimated compression at 13% this year. Oops, I didn't. There we go. We estimated compression at 13% this year, and the actual compression was lower at 10%. So we're seeing a positive variance on the compression line of $267,000. It's almost impossible to estimate compression because it's a weighted average allocation per property between all of the local governments that are taxing that property. So we have some good consultants that work with us on this, but it is almost impossible to project what compression is going to be. So this is pretty darn close that we got here. So our levied assessments, because we had less compression than what we anticipated, were higher than what we anticipated in the budget. And I will just, as a side note, SDIC as a district was not subject to compression. So it's hard in any year to estimate compression, but we were guessing on an entity that had never had any compression, which made it even harder. So I think our consultants, the group that we were working with, did a really good job of helping us look at each individual property and figure out where they thought we were going to land.
With the consolidation, the landowners in the former SDC now are subject to compression. So
yes,
that's winners and losers.
So across the board now, we're subject to compression, and we're going to talk about that in a couple of slides here. So we're estimating a little bit more of a collection loss this year than was budgeted. We've got some specific property issues that we're working through with the county. We had some weird things happen where they did some changes in tax lots, and we found some kind of odd things coming out with those properties. So we're working on that. So hopefully that'll be a little better by the time we get to the end of the year. But all of those things added up together, we're estimating that our assessment revenues are going to be within $2,000 of what we budgeted, which is pretty close.
Buy some snacks with the overage.
No, we're going to put that money in reserve.
Right. That's what I meant.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about compression. So in that compression number, there's some really key things to be aware of in compression. So we have 2 golf courses on the floodplain, and that's $142,000 worth of compression. So the value of that, the real market value of those properties is pretty low. And so we lose $142,000 worth of assessment revenue because of the compression on those properties.
I think the value's low because they're typically designated open space, so
Yep.
there's not a lot of commercial value in redevelopment, which pushes that tax rate down.
And we'll talk a little bit about compression here in a minute too, because I know you all were interested in that. So Metro holds some properties that have $103,000 worth of compression. The Port has property with $88,000 worth of compression. Just as a side note, the Port has been a great partner, and we've had some really interesting things with properties that are partially leased and partially owned by the Port, and that when we were billing those through the county was resulting in some huge compression numbers, and we've worked with the county. And so we're direct billing almost $2 million worth of assessments to the Port now, and they're paying that quickly. So we really appreciate that collaboration and the ability to be able to direct bill that so that we're not experiencing that compression. The city of Portland has a lot of parks property, a lot of right-of-ways, a lot of things that don't have good value. And so we've got $500,000 worth of compression on city property. And then we've got 300,000 on all the rest. So it's all those businesses, all of those residents. It's not a huge amount when you really start to parse it out. So if you recall, we have intergovernmental agreements with both the Port and the city that allow us to recover revenues in other ways that we're losing to compression. So when we look at that general non-government property owner compression of about $300,000, that's 2.75%. It's pretty small. So it's one of the things to keep in mind when we start into revenue discussions. And do you want to do something different with revenue? Collection cost is low. The only collection cost that we have for our assessments is the 3% discount that's provided by the county. The county does not charge us to collect our assessments, and our compression is relatively low when you start to pull out some of these individual properties that are really causing the bulk of it.
I think there is a political perception, particularly in East County, that number is far bigger.
Yes.
So, and again, it's a real perception. There are great partners out there in East County, and they're legitimately concerned about it. But let us know if you're hearing about it. We can help you with some numbers, which again will assist, but probably not eliminate that ongoing tension.
All right, so I'm going to take just a minute to talk about compression and how does this happen in the property tax and assessment world. So it's been in place for a number of years at this point. Started with Measure 5, which limits property taxes to 1.5% of the real market value of property. So this 1.5% is split between schools and general government entities, and our assessments fall under the $10 per thousand general government limit on taxes and assessments. So I will say as a side note, property taxes for our general obligation bonds are not subject to compression. So in addition to Measure 5, voters also placed limits on the amount that assessed value can increase each year to 3%, and that was under Measure 50. This limits the amount that property taxes can increase each year, as property taxes are an amount that's applied to assessed value. So you have a dollar amount per thousand assessed. Our assessments are not directly impacted by that limit. We can increase our assessment rate by more than 3% a year, and our assessments are not allocated as a dollar per assessed value. So we had a 10% rate increase this year, just for you to be aware of. We use a cost allocation formula that looks at the type of expenses we're projecting for the year, the impervious surface or those hard surfaces on each of the properties, and the space that's occupied by the property or the acreage. How big is it? So we're looking at flood risk. It doesn't really have anything to do with assessed value of the property. It's more that like what is the nature of the property? So we do our allocation based upon the nature of the property. So if a property hits the measure 5 limit, going back to that previous slide, that $10 per thousand, there's compression. And compression is what it sounds like. It's reduced tax. So any government that's assessing that property is going to get their share of that property tax reduction so that the property owner is not paying more than that $10 per thousand in real market value. So let's look at a simple example, and then we'll look at a more realistic example. So in this example, we have two properties that are allocated the same amount of assessment, $5,000. We're gonna send them our property assessment. So these are similar properties from a flood standpoint. Property A has a measure 5 limit of $2,000, and property B has a measure 5 limit of $10,000. This means that the real market value of property A is lower than property B because they have a limit. They've hit that $10 per thousand. So the amount of the assessment that's imposed on property A is $2,000. And on property B, because they haven't hit the limit, is $5,000. So we've got compression loss on property A of $3,000. That's a really simple example. Now we're going to look at these two houses. They're in the same neighborhood. They don't look to me like they're in the same neighborhood. One of them looks like they're in Arizona, but I blame my consultant for that. So we have two homes that are in the same neighborhood, one that doesn't like grass and one that likes to water. They're in the same tax zone. They both have an assessed value of just under $268,000. So that second line, you can see their assessed value is the same, which seems weird to me too, because I would think that. But assessed values are weird, and you can find this in the tax rolls where you have this huge house that has the same assessed value as a small house. Some of that has to do with when the house was built, but it happens. So these two have the same assessed value. So their calculated tax is the same, $37, $47, $55 on both of them. Okay, now let's look at the measure 5 limits. We've got that general government limit of $10 per thousand. The real market value on number 1 is $320,000. And the real market value on property 2, gosh, I wish I lived in this town, is $380,000. So we end up on property 1 with a maximum measure 5 limit of $3,200 because their real market value is $320,000. So on this property, there's compression of $547 because they have that limit. So their real market value wasn't high enough to be able to cover all the taxes. On property 2, their value was high enough. And so they're going to be taxed the full amount, the $37, $47, $55. Property 1 is only going to be taxed $3,200. So that's compression. It's really confusing. When you look at the houses, it can make no sense at all. And that's just the nature of the tax system.
How does real market value get calculated?
Well,
It seems like
that's the assessor's job.
Okay. I think it's just like.
And so they will at times let folks know, hey, you pulled some permits, so we're going to come out and reassess the value of your property.
Getting reassessed.
So, but they don't have enough staff at the county to be able to go out and assess every single property every single year. So,
I'll be calling you later.
So that is.
Being recorded.
Well, and candidly, it's appropriate. Our house hasn't been assessed in a long time, and it's worth more than the assessed real market value.
People add additions, garages, and they don't necessarily replace.
So remember, your assessed value is what's driving the calculation of your tax. The real market value, so when they come out and say, what is your property worth, is what's determining whether you have a Measure 5 limit or not. So, and so from the county's perspective, but for these properties that are compressed, it really doesn't matter because the assessed value can only go up 3% a year. So they're not so concerned about going out and making sure they properly got the real market value right for every single property every year. I had an assessor tell me that, we haven't had tax appeals since this has been put in place because people really like to see that their property tax bill only goes up 3% a year. And if they see that consistency, they're not going to complain. So, the pluses and minuses of the tax limitations, but this is why compression happens. So if you have a neighbor that asks you about this and you want to go back to these slides and you don't remember what I said, just call me and I can walk you through it again because it is really, really confusing. So,
all right, it's interesting because it's almost like a snapshot.
Yeah.
And so it depends on when these measures, and then it got frozen, which is like when you go to North Portland, that's some of it's kind of like buying property with a low tax rate. That's some of the lowest tax rates on some of the most expensive properties in the city. So there's also sorts of inequities, but
yes, it's true. Yeah, you're better off to buy an older house because your taxes are lower.
Maybe when we get our capital program done, we can take that on.
I keep saying $20 million district is not going to change Oregon's tax laws, but. All right, so let's take a look at our forecast for our general fund expenditures. This again shows our appropriation level, and this means that for each of these line items, we can't exceed the budget for the year. And like we talked about, we're projecting that all of our divisions are going to be less than budget this year, mainly because of those open positions and also some timing of spending. And then you'll see that contingency line down there. We're anticipating not spending that. There's the $600,000 on the lineup for that 13th Avenue Pipe Project savings. So we're looking at $4.2 million in budget savings for this current year. So a lot of that's timing, gives us some real flexibility. It's going to be an interesting challenge for us because we're going to have some fund balance carry forward. We're going to have some local partners upset about that probably, and we need to really work on our discussion about why that happened and what that means for us as an organization. I think it gives us some stability, and I'll be encouraging you not to turn around and say, well, let's spend it next year instead of bringing in revenue. We'll start to look at the 5-year forecast too for the district. We've got some debt service payments that are out there in future years that this is going to really help us with. So more to come on that. But that's where we're at with that. Our forecast fund balance, last but not least, we have those designated funds that I talked about for SDIC and Penn 2. So when we were working through and negotiating about how we were going to consolidate districts, one of the things that we did to be able to really facilitate a smooth transition is for Penn 1, Penn 2, and SDIC, we agreed that we would designate any carry forward funds from those districts for use in that district area. Those were from assessments from those property owners. And so for the current year, we're using that both for operating costs in those districts and for capital projects. I'm going to propose to you that next year that it'll be project money only because we will have collected assessments from those areas this year that can go towards operating expenses. So we're going to work to identify some projects that we can continue to do in those areas next year. We've spent all the Penn 1 money now, but for SDIC and Penn 2, we'll come forth with some projects and try to get that money spent next year, because I think any further than that, I think would be really awkward to have that carry forward funds.
The good news is there's some important projects to implement.
Yep. Yep. So we've got about $200,000 projected in restricted funds. And then we've got undesignated projected at 14.3 million. 6 months worth of that we need just to get through the first 6 months of the year before we start collecting. And then we have some potential for reserves for capital or maintenance. And I think this just puts us in a really solid financial position going into ratings, discussion on ratings, and just helps us to continue that stable finance that we're trying to build for the organization that we didn't have with the legacy districts.
I do want to really emphasize that under virtually any possible scenario, given the statutory limitations on the flood safety benefit fee, and the amount we can increase that, and the complexity of the assessments with compression, that over the long term, staff costs and operating costs are going to go up higher than our ability to generate revenue. We don't know when that line's going to cross, but it looks good now, and that's really important, but it will get tighter under almost any conceivable future scenario.
Within the 5-year period, we really start to see that we have some challenges. So, yeah. All right. So the last but not least, this is our draft budget priorities for 25-26. Not going to ask you to make any sort of decision on this today, but we did want you to start to take a look at this. I think the focus really for us in next year is that strategic planning for the future, making sure that we really know what direction we want to go as an organization. Our second category here is capital investment. So really getting up and running on that general obligation bond on those projects, getting staffed up so we have enough engineers and project managers to be able to really get going on our design and get everything to 30% design so we can have a better sense of the costs. We always want to continue to invest in our employees. So we want to prioritize safety of our employees. We're doing a pay equity study. We just contracted with an organization and we're going to be putting together a communication plan. So they'll be meeting with you all to kind of talk about the process and what they'll be doing for pay equity. We're really trying to confirm that we're competitive and that we're meeting all of the Oregon requirements around pay equity. So we'll be talking to you about that work as well. And if there's anything that we need, any changes that we need to implement, we would want to do that in next year's budget. And we want to support the development of our employees. And then the last thing on our list is really focus on equity. So developing some department level equity strategies, investing in some equity training, both for you all and for our staff members, and integrating equity and hiring in our capital planning and procurement are really things that we want to get moving on next year. These are all in addition to all of the responsibilities that we have as an organization. They are not in place of. So I really look at the budget priorities as being, okay, we have a list of requests that we need to look at and figure out what we're going to include in the budget. The list is always longer than the money that you have left over to fund them. And so these are the sorts of things that we would look to say, does this spending fall into these priorities? Is this something that we want to be focusing on for next year? So next fall, we'll really be working with you to develop the budget priorities, but we worked as an executive team to really try to give you some direction in what we thought was important for next year. So that's what these things are. If you can read through these, think them over. I'm not asking for any feedback today, but if you have changes or there are other things that you want us to focus on, then let's talk about that next time and make sure that we have the right direction so that we come to you with a proposed budget that really is reflecting the sorts of priorities that we all agree should be what is included for next year's budget. So with that, that's all I got.
Would exploration of like nature-based solutions fall at all in line with the planning taking place in 2025 where like we may need to, and is that already allocated for, or would that need to be called out like as a priority because of the new scope?
It's in the bond fund, and then we have the $500,000, and then in the current fiscal year, there's dollars to get going on the watershed plan, which will define a lot more of that. And we will be bringing you a proposed budget that incorporates ongoing spending in those categories for your review and approval.
But you're right, Jim, the watershed planning is really a key part of that. And that was in that first priority section of planning for the future, is getting going on that watershed planning. So
we have an RFP on the streets. I think we had over 20 firms attend a briefing session on the possibility of bidding on the work. So we're pretty excited about the response.
Any community engagement, does that fall in the kind of main budget, or are there grant potential that exists within that the fiscal year outside of?
It would be in Colin's budget, so in his planning and public affairs budget. And like we talked about, we've just sent out an offer for a new staff person in that area. Or we're
We
getting
let them
ready.
know an offer is pending. So
We are getting ready. I think I probably am holding it up at this point because I haven't signed it this afternoon, but
she has to sign it first before.
but we are getting ready to give that offer. And so I think that's really going to help Colin to have that support, be able to really start to build up that work.
There is some budget around planning to do more of that work too.
Yeah. It's been him and only him in his department for a few months now, so it's really hard to keep everything, all the balls in the air when it's one person, but he does a fantastic job of it, so.
So what about outreach around the general obligation or any bond projects?
So bond projects, one of the things that we're really building into those project budgets is making sure that we're gonna get that outreach in there. That's part of the cost of the project. And so this new person that hopefully is gonna accept our offer gladly will be part of a really important part of our team of senior managers that are making decisions and working through that bond program. They'll be there side by side as they talk about every issue, and that person will really be doing the strategic work around communication and outreach. So it is an integral part of every piece of those projects.
Questions or comments for Lori? Fantastic job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and right on.
Get us.
So just in our future agenda planning, it's looking like we have more than 2 hours worth of agenda topics for February's meeting. So I wanted to check in with people if they prefer to start half an hour earlier or to go to 5:30. And you can follow up by email if you don't know the second.
I like earlier.
I would also prefer earlier.
Consensus of earlier.
Yeah, it's harder for me to be earlier, but if that's the consensus, then that's fine.
Okay. Thank you so much for that.
We'll try and minimize the amount of time we need from you. We also think that we probably will need more time with you than a monthly meeting initially. So we'll talk with your chair and vice chair about how to confront you with that opportunity.
A question about schedule. At one point, you sent out placeholders for different days and so forth. So do we have 2 meetings for February?
I would prefer to meet with the chair and vice chair and talk through the items and get some direction from them about that. But our forecast is we may need more time from you. But that's really up to you. We can do our jobs, but we wanted to ensure that you had the opportunity to provide the direction. So we're in a little bit of that space of trying to figure out how much you guys want to spend time with us, giving us direction. We are very receptive to your direction, but we also want to staff you the way you want to be staffed. So by way of, we're in this together, and I look forward to figuring it out collaboratively with all of you. Actually, it won't be collaboratively. You'll tell us what you want, and we'll provide it.
So does that mean we know when our next meeting is, or we don't know?
So
when
the
our next meeting?
We don't know if we're having an extra meeting in February yet. I would like to talk to your chair and vice chair about that. We do know that you have your meeting later in the month in February, that third Thursday.
Right.
Unless you all want to decide, you want an extra meeting in February now, we have things we can talk to you about.
Well, is there, is it timely? Like, is it like, we have to meet in February or March? Like, I don't know.
Let's talk with the chair and vice chair and walk through maybe a little bit longer time frame so you see the bigger picture. If you guys want, we can do that with the full board too, but let's start with you guys and I'll have Wendy reach out and find some time for us to talk.
I mean, I'm happy to meet as the chair and vice chair, but I mean, we can decide stuff, but I really like, so I kind of think it should be a board conversation. I mean, that's.
Okay, I'm perfectly happy with that too. It's just trying to balance that use of your time. So we're happy to do it. Maybe we could come with a larger schedule in February. I'm loath to say we want you in mid-February right now without a little more thinking, but happy to take your time. Sorry to be evasive.
Yeah, I mean, you could, we'll talk and then we can maybe offer a menu, do a doodle poll or.
That would be great. Yeah, if you guys take that.
I guess it reminds me of something else I wanted to ask about is we're getting started, so not that we would necessarily have it today, but other public agencies that I've dealt with have sort of a forward-looking calendar to where they've got, like we would have these budget dates would be out there, and so I'm wondering whether that's something that staff could put together a draft of for a coming meeting so that we can see, oh, okay, we're going to be considering a watershed plan proposal, something, we're going to be looking at this particular kind of thing out here in May, just so we sort of see some of the things on the horizon, not that they have to happen that day because things end up having to shift a little bit, but just sort of having a sense of
Landscape.
what's out there that we need to be sort of.
We have that. Let us polish it and we'll put it in your next packet.
I think that would really help onboarding too, to not ask questions that like we knew are coming.
Yeah.
It use time efficiently.
Okay, we'll pull that together for you guys. We have it. But if we turn those whiteboards around, it might even be on. I don't know.
Like that 5 o'clock exactly. Is there anything else for good of the order?
Just a thank you to the staff. It was my first time through the cycle. All the materials and dialogue and everything was really, really cool. So thank you.
Thank you for your time. You guys are volunteers and we really appreciate you stepping up. It's very exciting for your crew to have you all here. It really, really is. So thank you guys so much.
Meeting is adjourned.
Yay!